Hi, this is Doug Manch, and you're listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast.
Yes, welcome back, loony listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 199, and you are with your High Priest KHONSHU, Ray. Hello, good evening. And I'll be flying solo, so to speak, and that analogy is quite apt for this episode. For our 199th, we are doing a modes of transport idle chat. So a discussion on Moon Knight's various modes of transportation. As mentioned, I am your High Priest KHONSHU, Ray. A big shout out to would-be co-host The Power of Chad. He's incurring KHONSHU's wrath at the moment, so I hope you feel better, Chad. Sorry I can't have you here on this episode. But yes, hopefully you feel better. Hopefully KHONSHU is a bit more lenient towards you. But anyway, we'll press on with this episode. And before I do anything, of course, a big gracious thank you to the Patronies. So those listed as co-producers and executive producers on each of the episodes, a huge thank you. Your support really does help the show, and so I'm forever grateful to the likes of Daniel, Justin, Derek, Wayne, Jordan, Josh, James, Russell, and Anthony. A big thank you to all you guys. Also, a couple of shout-outs to our sponsors, Fringe Knight by Daniel Doing, an original indie comic based on Erie, Pennsylvania's very own mysterious superhero. Of course, Hello Headphones, empowering gamers to play at their best. Go grab yourself a pair of headphones there. And finally, Dreamland Comics from Illinois, the superhero superstore. Right, so some white noise, loony listeners. I am recording this a little after I've recorded the body of this main podcast. Thought I'd jump in. Big news. Now, take it with a grain of salt because it hasn't been confirmed. This is through Bleeding Cool, and not the most reputable of sites, I must admit. But it's got a lot of loonies' tongues wagging, and that is basically, it has been announced apparently that Moon Knight, a comic book series, will be released in July of this year with writer Jed MacKay and artist Alessandro Cappuccino. So this is big news. The initial response from a lot of the loonies in our community is largely positive with Jed MacKay. He's known to have written Marvel titles such as Man Without Fear, Black Cat, and Taskmaster. And I can say, having read most of them, mostly they've been pretty good. So I'm quite happy with the choice. I wasn't too fond of Man Without Fear, but I found Black Cat and I'm starting to read Taskmaster on Marvel Unlimited actually quite an enjoyable read. It'll be interesting to see how he takes Moon Knight and where he takes Moon Knight, because I've noticed there's, apart from Man Without Fear, there's always a little bit of humour injected in there, and that you can certainly see with Black Cat and Taskmaster as well. So interesting to see what Jed MacKay has pitched for the character, and Marvel have apparently as well allegedly greenlit it, so fingers crossed, more news to come. Hopefully we'll get an official announcement at some stage, but there you go, a little bit of a scoop there via a not so reputable site, Bleeding Cool. Okay, back to the show. So anyway, loonies, as I gaze into the mic here, it's quite an interesting episode, this one. So as mentioned, it's modes of transport, and I should have come up with a more humorous or a more amusing title for our idle chat, but I couldn't really think of one. And as it says on the tin, going through the different modes of transport, we know Moon Knight and Mark Spector. We know Stephen Grant is a billionaire, very wealthy, and Moon Knight has his gadgets, but he needs to get around, doesn't he? And he needs to do it kind of stealthily. And anyway, so he has a few things up his sleeve to allow him to drop down on criminals, to also catch them by surprise, that sort of thing. And it's a very kind of colourful history, in particular, of one of the aspects, which is the moon copter, which we'll get into anyway. So, yeah, I mean, settling in, I've just got my big mug of Spider-Man's head, and I fill that with a bit of mocha coffee. So settle in. Let's go. I mean, so to kick off, as I mentioned, the mooncopter is probably the main mode of transport you'd see or associate Moon Knight with. He, right from the get-go, his first appearance in Werewolf by Night 32, you could see the helicopter there. But there are so many. In fact, there are about 6 different mooncopter variations we see throughout the Moon Knight canon. And so the very first one, which we do see at Werewolf by Night 32 and 33, I guess is considered his first helicopter. Now, they retconned this whole story by saying that Frenchie, he tried to infiltrate the committee. It was all kind of a bit of a setup. It wasn't as straightforward as was seen in Werewolf by Night. So, as official Marvel canon goes, this helicopter, which for all purposes looks very much like a normal helicopter, was apparently a rented version. So it wasn't really the mooncopter, but I've added it in there because hey, it was there in his first appearance. For all intents, during that 1975 run, the helicopter was Moon Knight's, and it was kind of piloted by Frenchie and all that. But again, as I mentioned, they went back on that and they said, well, hang on, that wasn't his real mooncopter, which is fair enough, because I can understand why they do that, because it's not that really impressive. If I am to just quickly bounce to, there's actually a great little read for those of you, and I'll put it in the show notes. There's a nice little read in Moon Knight Volume 1, 27, which is what I'll draw a lot of this information from. So anyway, let me just go to that. And it actually even goes down to the kind of model. So it's written by Alan Zelenitz, and some of you will know he went on to write The Fist of KHONSHU. And anyway, he mentions here that in Werewolf by Night, the first in August 1975, it very much looked like your run-of-the-mill Bell 47H or some such. So I am no helicopter aficionado, but that sounds pretty technical to me. So apparently that first helicopter was a Bell 47H. And again, for all intents, if you look... actually, it doesn't even look like a typical helicopter we have these days. It certainly doesn't look like a moon in any regard. It has the obviously the rotor blades, more so the main horizontal ones at the top. There are no, I guess, what do you call sled bases? I don't know, that you usually associate helicopters with. In this instance, it had like 4 wheels, which is very strange. It had a full kind of, 180 view, like the screen. But other than that, yeah, it just looked very ordinary. So that was the first instance of the mooncopter, and as I mentioned, that made its way through Werewolf by Night 32 and 33. After that, we actually do get the first Moon Knight model. Now, this was seen in Marvel Spotlight 28 and 29. You got the likes of Defenders 47, 49, Marvel 2-in-1 52, Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man 22 and 23, as well as the Amazing Spider-Man 220, and in the Hulk magazines 11, 12, 13, 14, and finally in Marvel Preview 21. Now this helicopter was slightly different, as mentioned. And if I'm to take the writings of Alan Zelenetz's article from 27, he says it kind of reminds you of Vincent Price as The Fly. And I guess that's an apt description. It's a very kind of, again, I know the early episodes of Into the Night, KHONSHU and I really did have a go and tease these early moon copters, but they really are kind of garish, and they are, dare I say, a little bit hideous compared to the later models. But this second model, as I mentioned, was considered the first Moon Knight model, the first official one. It looked very heavy, and in the fact that it kind of looked like Vincent Price's The Fly, the front bit were kind of like two bulbous, kind of fly-like eyes. I'm not even sure. I'm looking at a picture right now. I'm not even sure which way the helicopter goes, forward or backwards. I believe the kind of the bug-like eyes are the front kind of pilot cockpit. So that's probably it there. Zelenetz goes on to say there's a wraparound side glass cockpit bubble, which is, so that's it, those big kind of fly eyes. And the little cruiser has no master computer aboard, so the extra window space helped Frenchie to actually see Mark, and because we know Frenchie does a lot of surveilling, I guess, and he keeps an eye on Mark or Moon Knight as Moon Knight goes down that rope ladder. So no computers there, but yeah, just a lot of visual access, I guess, through that. I don't know, 180, more than 180, 200, 270, I don't know, 270 degrees field of view. Now, apparently the two side pods were not detachable, and they house retractable skids for solid ground landing. So maybe that's, yep, and for the clearer shots of the, and so he goes to say, you can see the shots more clearly in the Hulk magazine 11 and 13. So that was the first official, I guess, Moon Knight Copter. Now the next one, the third one, and I'm just opening it up here, the third iteration, which is kind of like the second official Moon Knight model, because remember the first version was like a retconned, rented helicopter. This second version of Moon Knight's Copter, was first seen in his main title of 1980 by Doug Mensch and Bill Sienkiewicz. So Moon Knight 1, 2, 3, then it jumps to 6, 7, and 8. And this one, I think, is probably the most horrible one I've seen. It kind of really looks almost like a toy. I mean, it's hard to... I mean, between this one and the one before it, I think they're both really terrible. But the best way I can describe this one is it starts to take on the shape of the moon. So at least we're there, right? It has... it's kind of like... If you are a modern reader and you know of the moon jet, and dare I say later on I'll speak of the angel wing, you'll know that it's more like a horizontal crescent moon, which kind of looks quite sleek, so it's a good idea. In this iteration, it is that, but then if you add mentally in your head to that crescent moon a point that comes out of the middle of that crescent, and a big flapping rotor blade that twizzles around, then you're starting to get what this moon copter looks like. So, again, if I can try to explain it, it's a crescent moon, right? But the rounded curve, outward curve, not the inner curve of the crescent moon, is the front, and there is a what looks like a horizontal rotor blade as well, but it's kind of pushed towards the back. And again, I might just put this in the Facebook groups and the page so you can actually see what it looks like. But it's quite terrible. And as mentioned, it's in the early Moon Knights. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. Not too good there. Let me see what Alan Zelentz had said about this. Carried away perhaps by enthusiasm for the success of his Moon Knight persona, and wishing to establish a symbol with which to strike terror into the hearts of the criminals he pursued, Stephen Grant had Frenchie redesign the helicopter, the helicopter's entire body in the shape of a crescent moon lying on its side. And he goes on to say that they can go into details. Look, I've kind of given you the roundabout gist of it, but what happens, unfortunately, I think by issue 7, it finds its way in a Chicago basin, or some water. I think this was the one where the water was tainted. Frenchie went crazy as well, and Mark managed to crash the chopper into the water, save Frenchie, that sort of stuff. So that was the third kind of moon copter. The fourth one comes in a bit later, still in the same series, Moon Knight issue 10, and apparently you can see it a little bit clearer in issue 14. So this is, it's still a bit weird, I must say. I just had a look at it there. They really can't get it right, can they? Anyway, the fourth one is, it's kind of like the crescent moon is then no longer on its side, it's tilted up, and this is actually, it's starting to give the bones of what we see later on as well in the likes of the Charlie Houston run, which I think is a really cool moon copter, which I think it may have a different ability, but this one, the crescent moon is upright vertical, and that acts as almost the tail of this copter. So the rotor blades are on the tip of that top of that crescent moon, and you have more like almost like a space shuttle kind of nosing, and some sort of body that kind of fits into the moon copter. I looking at this, I do believe that the Houston run and David Finch lent heavily on this design, but they modernized it and made it look a lot more cooler than what it did back in the 80s. So that was the third one as well. Let me see if I can get some more. So some other like aspects here. One of the main things, I guess, also should be mentioned. Apparently, the Moon Knight, the helicopter, despite what I just said about it being crashed into the river, it is submersible. That's it. It can actually survive and travel underwater as well, which is a very strange thing. I've never actually seen that happen, but it is in the official handbook here, so I'm not too sure where they came up with it, or they had an idea to use it, but it never happened. So if I'm to go, back to, I'm going to read this. I think this is still part of this fourth version. So anyway, it's a twin-engine craft employing two 825 horsepower turboshaft engines. It's got an engine reconfiguration and custom designed by Frenchie from two Lycoming T53L 11As. Doesn't that sound technical? I'm going to put it in. I have no idea if this is right or not, or if it's touching some sort of truth. I don't know. Anyway, it makes it an almost noise-free whisper capacity, which combined with a white noise system, apparently, that absorbs the chop-chop of the rotor blades, renders the helicopter nearly silent. So that's pretty cool. And that's always been the case with Moon Knight's moon copter. I do recall there are always some comments about how silent it is, how they just don't know where Moon Knight comes from. He just pops out of nowhere, and that's really down to, and this is very important, the silence of that helicopter. The high-efficiency 32-foot rotor blades are made of carbon-impregnated fiberglass and mounted on a universal rotor joint. And it says here, and as no knight should be without his armor, the Copter's external frame is made of foamed alloy armor. And then it goes on to say the sealed fuselage makes the craft completely immersible, so water landings are no problem. And they have retractable flotation gear, so for water landings, and retractable wheels. And the front wheels are mounted on long legs, so the lower crescent tail shape, which is mainly the fuel tank, apparently, and affords the craft extra stability. Incorporates a third landing wheel. So it goes into a bit of detail there, which is pretty cool. Oh, and starts talking about one of the main things of this helicopter is the rope ladder. So the rope ladder and grappling iron are also contained in the sophisticated undercarriage and are manipulated by special trigger controls on the cyclic stick, which control power hoist winches to raise or lower the ladder. I'm going to read all this technical stuff because it just sounds good, okay? So the current copter seats a pilot and 3 passengers and possesses a range of 504 or 811 kilometers when loaded to maximum takeoff weight of about 9,000 pounds or 4,000 kilos. Maximum speed of 180 to 200 miles per hour, so we're talking about 290 to 320 kilometers per hour, and a service ceiling at maximum takeoff weight at, I don't know what this means, 19,000 feet or 5,800 meters. Now, this iteration of the Moon Copter carries no armaments, but there is a master computer which is on it as well. It can interpret data on direction, speed, and altitude, that sort of thing. Has autopilot. Kind of makes Frenchie's job a bit easier. So it's got radar and sonar as well as a perpetual scan for police, emergency, and maritime frequencies. So it's pretty much on the go, isn't it? So that was, I guess, it says the current model, the 4th model. So as mentioned, Moon Knight 10, it goes through 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 20, 21, 24, 25. And there's actually a cross-section as well. I should put this up again. Again, all of this is in Moon Knight Volume 1, 27. So if you have it, or if you have Marvel Unlimited, I'm pretty sure it's on that as well. You can go check out these details. It's pretty cool. So, again, as I mentioned, this is probably... this is what kind of really influenced David Finch and Charlie Huston later on in the 2006 run. So, actually, I'm thinking, let's stick to the Moon Copter then, might as well. And so, let me have a little look. And so, anyway, the next, I guess, iteration, it kind of jumps. It goes, we're heading toward 90s territory, and what we get, particularly in Mark Spector Moon Knight, the likes of Round Robin, the sidekick's revenge in Amazing Spider-Man, towards the end of the 90s with High Strangeness or High Strangers and Resurrection War, what we tend to get is then a more kind of jet-like. So going back to the second or the third version of the Moon Copter. So the one that was from Moon Knight 1980 issue 1. The one that I mentioned was a crescent moon, but it was on its side laying flat, but it had a rotor blade. Now the big difference that they did in the 90s was they made it a lot cooler in the fact that they got rid of the rotor blades. It became more like a jet now, a moon jet. And instead of, if you can imagine the 2 tips of the crescent at the rear of the vehicle, they swiveled it around and it became more the front of the vehicle. So it became more like, even, dare I say, kind of like a Star Wars fighter, some sort of fighter jet. Similar-ish, I'm not talking about exact copies, but it just made it look a little bit more dynamic, and it just made it look a little bit more sleek. So it got it totally left, though, the rotor blades behind, and I think that was a really good move. Now, that was also, incidentally, I think one of the main things that was taken away from the Charlie Huston, David Finch run as well, where he replaces it, I guess, more with jets, like doing that. Let me just have a little quick look here. I'm looking at issue 5 of the David Finch. There we go. Issue 5 of the Charlie Huston, David Finch run. It's more jets here, so I guess hence the moon jet. But we'll get to that. But as I mentioned, so in the 90s, they turned it around, made it a bit more sleek, made it look a bit more Star Warsy, and so you have that kind of like aesthetic. Now, I think they added armaments to it as well, very much so, actually. In particular, if I'm to read this here, this was ripped off the wiki page as well, and this is in particular referencing the Moonjet from Mark Spector, Moon Knight, that run. So privately built, a one-of-a-kind helicopter, top speed 220 miles per hour, which is similar or actually just beating the previous model, at a ceiling of 10,000 feet with a range of 1,000 miles. I don't know what that ceiling service is. 3 undermounted rotors for propulsion, and 2 forward-mounted 20mm cannons for armament. So that's the big difference there, and we do see it play in Mark Spector Moon Knight. I do believe a lot of it happens in the Acts of Vengeance, in particular with Killer Shrike. I think Frenchie unleashes a lot of those 20mm cannons onto the street to try and take out those supervillains. But that's a big difference as well. And for me, I kind of like this this version of the Mooncopter, just because of its horizontal and flat aspect. But again, it just looks really sleek. I mean, if you're looking at the likes of the X-Men's Blackbird, that's a pretty cool jet. But this one, since it looks like a crescent moon, I don't know, it's just pretty cool. Again, I think you see it in the Scarlet Redemption as well, but don't hold me to that. So with that in the 90s, my iPad keeps on falling down. With that in the 90s, in the late 90s, I guess we travel forward, and as mentioned, we hit the Charlie Huston run, and as mentioned, we get a return of this Moonjet. Now, I think the big difference with this, because if you do, there are actually 2 iterations of the Moonjet or Mooncopter in the Charlie Huston run. At first, in issues 1, I guess, if you look 1 to 4, you can look through those, and it seems to be very similar to the 90s Moonjet. I'm just thinking as well, actually, I should also make a little honourable mention. In the 90s, it just hit me, there was another really weird-looking Moonjet. I'm going to tentatively say Angel Wing, but I know that was used for another mode of transport later on. But I think there was an Angel Wing in Mark Spector Moon Knight. If any loonies out there can tell me, please do. I just remember it had literal wings, kind of wing-looking things, angelic wings, and a really bulbous body. So that was in Mark Spector Moon Knight as well. I am pretty sure it was in that run. As for armaments and stuff, I couldn't tell you. So I forgot about that one, so sorry. So anyway, going back to the Charlie Houston run iteration, as mentioned, it leans heavily on the that fourth or third Moon Knight Copter version that I mentioned from Moon Knight Volume 1, Issue 10 onwards, when that's basically when Frenchie has to redesign the Copter again, because after it had crashed into the river in Chicago. So yeah, it takes a lot of leanings from that, but as I mentioned, it does away with the rotor blades at the top, and what you get is almost, you get kind of like three, it looks like three, well, it says here, three undermounted rotors for propulsion, and it's really shown well in the Charlie Houston run, issue 5. And very much has that classic look. But I guess what I was saying in the beginning of the Houston run is that I think it can transform to go sideways as well. So I'm assuming what happens, I could be wrong, because actually, no, take it back, Ray. No. The beginning of the Houston run, I'm looking at it, it's very much just a crescent moonjet. So we're talking very similar. Yeah, there it is. It's on the first few pages of issue 1 after Moon Knight gets those goons in the car chase. It's very much even a more slick model of the 1990s version of the Copter. But by issue 5, as I mentioned, it's he changes it again and goes back to that more classic look, but without the dorky rotor blade at the top, but just it's got three, I guess, jet propulsions to the underside of the Moon Copter. So there you go, loonies. And then I think from there on, I think it kind of just chops and change. I think they stick a lot to the 1990s version of that kind of flat horizontal look. I can't recall if they in the latter. So I'm thinking, I should just have a check. 1 second. Okay, Looney, sorry about that. I'm going to move on to, before I get onto the next mode of transport, I'm going to just have a quick look in Vengeance of the Moon Knight. So one of the main things there, it isn't shown. One of the main things there is of course Moon Knight's moon cycle. So this is the next mode of transport. So let me just put up the information there. Okay, so we see in Vengeance of the Moon Knight, Moon Knight drops a large metal ball from the sky when he returns to New York, and it cracks open, and in it he's got his moon cycle. So there's not much information on this other than it's a pretty cool motorcycle. Where he goes, it seems fully armored. Well, having said that, Moon Knight's got a gun on there. He's holding a gun. Look, it's got some hand protectors, I guess, unless they're side view mirrors. Twin headlights. Just looks like really thick wheels. But there's not much to it than that. He actually flips out of it after a couple of pages and crashes into a building, and I don't think we see it again, but he certainly does have a moon cycle. I'd like to see a bit more of it myself. There we go. There's also, it turns up again. He kind of lands on it and rides away. Yep. Oh, okay, here we go. In the Vengeance of the Moon Knight, again, it does look more like the 90s version of the Moonjet. Just a bit more slick, I think, and I think that's what they tend to go with in the more modern runs. So we'll just leave that one at that. It's not that hard to actually find Moon Knight, the Moon Copter and Moonjet in his comics. It features quite heavily, so it's not that hard to find. Anyway, so yeah, just confirming that his moon jet... Oh, and even in these later issues, between issues 7 to 10, there's one of him fighting Deadpool, and with the moon jet, at some times as well, he will always almost like stand on top of it as well, and I think you kind of see that in the round robin, Sidekicks Revenge 2. So that flat kind of platform for him, kind of helps him get around in more ways than one. Having said that, though, as well, I'm going to go to another one, which I was hesitant to say the word glider, because this is more of a glider. We've got Moon Knight's Angel Wing, and this is from his this from his 2014 run with Warren Ellis and Declan Shalvey. So it's a smaller vehicle. Basically, if you can imagine, it's bigger than a Green Goblin or Hobgoblin glider, but Moon Knight is mounted to the underside of it. It's more like kind of like hang gliding, but it's a massive, it's not fabric. I think it's metal. It's got its own bells and whistles. It has remote control access and some built-in gadgetry as well. So it's a pretty funky one. He uses that in, as I mentioned, the Ellis run. If I can just quickly find it. I believe it is issue 2. I think it's Sniper. I could be wrong. Or is it issue... it's the one where he crashes into the guy on the roof. Now, people are probably screaming at me now. I always get that wrong. It's not 5, it's not 4. Is it 4? No, it is 5. It is 5. It's at the end of 5. He comes beaming in. He crushes a guy with it. But that's not the one I was thinking of. Anyway, he does use this in that run. And it's pretty cool. It does have some bells and whistles. I think it's more remote control as well. Yep, so moving along, I think, to the final iteration. I've got, again, from the 2014 run, I've got Mr. Knight's Limo. Now, this would be... I'm citing it from issue 4. I think issue 4. Oh, I'm just having a look there. The Moon Glider, the Angel Wing, again, shows up in issue 3. Anyway, issue 4 is the Moon Limo. Mr. Knight is in it, and what a limo it is. It's pretty luxurious. It's a stretch limo. It's pretty big. Anyway, it's got a lot of... He's got like an armchair with massive controls. I don't know exactly what it does include, what he can do with it. I'm assuming a lot of surveillance, data recovery, that sort of stuff. Don't know if the limo is armed itself, but it does look pretty cool. And yeah, it's all white as well, so you can see him coming a mile away. So there you go. That pretty much, I think, covers the main, I guess, the history of a lot of the Moon Knight modes of transport. So, as mentioned, I'll put in the notes these issues where they do appear for at least the Moon Copter. The other ones kind of know as well. But they are worth having a look at, and I do hope that they are used a bit more, certainly in the next upcoming series, because I can't for the life of me think if Bemis had used it at all. I'm not too sure. I don't think he had, but they certainly are integral to to Moon Knight, especially the Moon Copter. It's really fun. We always joke about the rope ladder and such, but really good stuff. So go check them all out. All right, loonies, we are going to take a quick break. Wait a sec. Hold on. Hobby?
Hello, Ray. It's your old pal, Hobby.
What are you doing?
I'm interrupting this regularly scheduled podcast permanently. This is now Hobby's show.
Whoa. Don't you already have a show?
Ray, old chap. You know me. I need more.
Hobby, don't make me tell KHONSHU about this.
KHONSHU? Tell you what, Ray, old boy. If you plug my new sub-series on Tomes, I'll give you your show back. Deal?
Fine. If you want to learn about my guest here, Hobby, check out the new sub-series of Tomes of Evil, the Hobgoblin Historia, chronicling every appearance of the other goblin.
The better goblin, Ray! The better one!
The better goblin, the Hobgoblin. Only on Tomes of Evil, the comic book villain podcast.
Thank you, Ray! Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. You know, Moon Knight never beat me.
Goodbye, Hobby.
You belong to the Merry Marvel.
Anyone hear us?
This is Trey Lawson.
And I'm James Hickson.
Anyone can hear this broadcast. We need your help.
We've been kidnapped and imprisoned in a tomb by this creepy old undertaker named Mr. Gravely.
And he's forcing us to review his collection of Marvel horror comics. Stuff like Tomb of Dracula,
Werewolf by Night,
Man-Thing,
Ghost Rider,
and so much more.
forcing us to record these reviews as a podcast called The Tomb of Ideas.
If you can hear this, please contact our families. Call the authorities. Anyone. Tell them we can be found at...
Now, boys. Let's not give too much away. You can find James and Trey every other Wednesday at the Tomb of Ideas, a Marvel horror podcast. A proud member of the Cinepunks podcast group. See you there, Tomb Believers.
The Merry Marvel Party Society.
Yes, welcome back, loony listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 199, and you are thrust with the Ray Ramble as I see out this episode, looking into, my gosh, a big milestone up ahead. But before any of that, I'd just like to give a shout out to a few listeners from all over the place. Well, actually, from this instance, from YouTube in our Nightlines. So, got a couple of things here from CMK7. Beep, boop, beep, boop, boop. This is Chris. A big shout out to Chris. And for those of you that don't know as well, Chris has done amazing work with the Into the Night video stingers. So, you can see that on the Patreon page as well as any of the exclusive videos that we have for all Patreon members. But anyway, Chris says about episode 196, and this was about the Shadowland shenanigans that I had with Tim, special guest. Great discussion, guys. I prefer my KHONSHU more ambiguous and mysterious, whose motives are beyond human understanding. A true entity beyond space-time, unlike the Asgardian gods, who are just basically superheroes. That's why I disliked the Age of KHONSHU. It made KHONSHU too terrestrial in his motives and actions. Yeah, it's certainly a good take there, Chris, as well. And the Age of KHONSHU did really stamp its intentions down by making KHONSHU seem like that. And we've seen previously as well in Serpent War and in the Moon Knight Annual, written by Cullen Bunn, that KHONSHU seems to be perceived as kind of, real and no longer ambiguous. I'm similar with you. I like the ambiguity myself. Chris also gives us some feedback in episode 197 about the discussion I had with Tigra with Justin the Owl Osgood. And Chris says, another great episode, guys. It's always welcome when Justin the Owl perches by the podcast to share some of his wisdom with his deep, warm voice like an aged bourbon. And I'm always impressed by his comic knowledge. I was wondering about the long hair and beard on Oscar Isaacs in that choreography video too. I'm thinking that may be a holdover from his role in June, or maybe the series takes place during Mark Spector's The Bottom phase. That might jive because the rumours are that Mark is late in his career currently, but flashes back to his history. Tigra, such an interesting and fun character. I know in the 80s she was always played as a confident sexpot. I wonder if she'll show up in the She-Hulk Disney Plus series since they are chums. Yeah, good point. I'm hoping, man, that would be good actually. Good point. I'm hoping that she would be showing up in at least She-Hulk. I don't think we'll get her in Moon Knight, but you can always dream. I'm talking about myself. But yeah, no, good points there, Chris. And I like that other speculation about Oscar's hair and beard, unless that is part and parcel of his Moon Knight commitments. And yeah, if he does something like The Bottom, watch out. Although I'm wondering, will that then open a can of worms about ratings? And we're going to go into that again. But no, thank you so much for your comments there, Chris. We also have an interesting one here from Entertainment Culture, and they left feedback for our episode 162, all the way back, for an Over the Moon arc, which I think we did on Blood Brothers in the Mark Spector Moon Knight run. Anyway, they go on to say, the new MCU version should be reinvented with whole KHONSHU cult who worships the KHONSHU god, similar to Illuminati and work in the shadows, who were involved in supernatural activities with Elsa Bloodstone, who took him in after Bushman defeated him, so Mark can gain knowledge of the supernatural and design a Black Panther-type armor suit, which absorbed energy from the moon using Egyptian moonstone amulets embedded in his suit, giving super strength. Also, Mark Spector protected by KHONSHU God, who gives him wealth for the sacrifice of his soul. Thank you very much, Entertainment Culture. That sounds great. I mean, that sounds almost like fanfic. So I reckon you should record these ideas down in a blog or in some sort of writings. They are great ideas. Very specific. I'm not sure if any of that will, turn up in the Disney Plus TV show, but we can only dream, as I say. But very inventive. Thank you very much, Entertainment Culture. A lot of stuff in there, a lot of stuff packed in. It's good to see you bubbling with ideas. Great stuff. Anyway, Loonies, that is about it for now. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope it made sense. I hope it was fun in some sense to get an idea of the Moon Knight mode of transportation. Now, next phase, and there's going to be a bit of a break, actually. So our next episode is our 200th episode. So it's going to be a big one. I've got some surprises in store, but I'll need some time for it. So this will be the only episode out this week, and we'll have a break for the next week as well, just over the Easter break. But part of the episode 200 will involve a waning gibbous, which is a moonwalk. So the power of Chad will be joining me in doing a rendition of the Fist of KHONSHU issue 3, A Madness of Dreams. This should be a good one. I think Chad has chosen to be Robert Markham, so Chad will be taking the role of Morpheus, which will be pretty cool. As I said, episode 200 is going to have some crazy surprises. I can't wait to reveal them. I am stoked myself at having been able to get someone. Anyway, not only that, but there will hopefully be a slew of loonies, past and present co-hosts, all jumbled in together. Keep your eyes peeled on our social media, because there is another competition on top of the other one that we have about the badges the pins. There's another one where you can choose your avatar, and you'll be in the running for some prizes. I'll divulge a bit more later on. Anyway, very exciting stuff. But as mentioned, this is the only one this week, and we will take a week's break. We'll be back fighting fit. As mentioned, a big thank you to our patroonies, patreon.com/ITK Moon Knight. Check out the incentives. Check out if you'd like to join. It will help expand the show. If not, then just thank you so much for listening as well. As mentioned, Hello Headphones, if you use the code ITK Moon Knight, you'll get 10% off their online store. And Dreamland Comics, if you use the code MOON, you'll get 20% off. We're also an affiliate member of Entertainment Earth, so any of your action figure needs, just click the link in our show notes, and any purchases will help prop up the show. We'll get a little bit of that. Finally, we are part of the Collective, so a lot of really cool shows out there. Shows such as The Last Sons of Krypton, a Superman podcast. Massively good show. One great host. The other host I'm not too sure about. And also Sons of the Dragon, an Immortal Iron Fist podcast. Again, great show there. The new Iron Fist series, there's plenty to talk about too. And finally, Adelan Rising, a comic book podcast as well. Doing great stuff, covering a lot of stuff. Still touching on Inhumans, but certainly on mutants and X-Men as well. You can drop us a line, email us at itkmoonnight@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook page and group, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Discord, Get Vocal. We've got a website and Podchaser as well. Please consider dropping a rating there as well. That would really help. Alongside Apple Podcasts, just ratings would just help us get out there a bit more. And hopefully with the coming TV show, we can build this fan base. It's certainly a lot of fun. Anyway, loonies, I'm going to have to get out of here. But as mentioned, thank you so much for listening. Have a nice week's break. Get ready for our big 200th episode coming up. It's going to be a cast of thousands, hopefully, fingers crossed, but we'll catch you then. Until then, may KHONSHU watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.